Hi all, welcome to my channel Fighting Financial Crime. Through this channel, I plan to share news, insights, and case studies related to financial crime prevention, anti-money laundering, and sanctions. Let me start with a brief introduction. I'm a certified anti-money laundering specialist with more than 10 years of experience in the area of financial crime prevention. I have worked with several US, Europe, and Asia-Pac based financial institutions and consulting firms, and have worked on a variety of first line of defense roles. Currently, I am working with the India Capability Center of a global bank as head of financial crime operations. In the first video, we'll discuss a case study that has all the essential ingredients of a global money laundering nexus, including financing of a dreaded Middle East-based terrorist organization, narcotics trade in Europe, a cash-intensive business used as a front to launder proceeds of crime, and a bank that was hand in glove with the perpetrators of financial crime. The case is more than 10 years old, but the learnings that we can derive from it are still extremely relevant. The case relates to Lebanon-headquartered Shiite militant group Hezbollah's elaborate money laundering network that spanned 5 continents: North America, South America, Europe, Africa, and Asia. Hezbollah, a Lebanon-based Shia Islamist movement formed in 1982, is responsible for some of the deadliest terrorist attacks against the United States in history. The US government accuses Hezbollah of being behind the deadly truck bombings on the US Embassy Annex in 1984 and Marine barracks in Beirut in 1983. Hezbollah was designated as a foreign terrorist organization by the US government in 1997 during President Clinton's time in office, and is today designated as a foreign terrorist organization, a specially designated terrorist, and a specially designated global terrorist. As a result, all assets in the United States in which Hezbollah has an interest are blocked, and any transaction or dealing with such property or providing goods or services to Hezbollah is prohibited in the United States or by US persons without an appropriate license. This is how the Nexus operated. A business was set up that purchased used cars in US and shipped them to Cotonou in the West African country of Benin. Simultaneously, drugs were imported from Colombia and Mexico and sold in Europe. The money earned from selling used cars in Africa and from selling drugs in Europe were intermingled and sent to 2 exchange houses, Hassan Ayash Exchange Company and Elisa Exchange Company. The exchanges then deposited the money, the ostensible proceeds of a booming auto trade, into the Lebanese Canadian Bank, or LCB, so named because it was once a subsidiary of the Royal Bank of Canada Middle East. Part of the deposits were sent back to US to buy more used cars and keep the business going. However, part of the funds were also diverted to Lebanon, where it ended up in the hands of Hezbollah. More than 2 dozen US car dealerships were allegedly involved in this scheme, and over $300 million were wired to them for the purchase and shipment of used cars. US Drug Enforcement Administration agents believe the Hezbollah received at least $100 million a year from the criminal enterprise. Derek Mott's of United States Drug Enforcement Administration said that alleged Hezbollah suppliers were making 15, 20, even 25% profit on used cars, and the proceeds were all being sent back to Lebanon, and Hezbollah was benefiting. A 62-page complaint that was later filed in Manhattan federal court said proceeds that ended in Hezbollah's pocket reportedly enabled it to fund political and social service, land acquisition, and militia activities in the Middle East. American intelligence analysts believe that for years, Hezbollah received as much as $200 million annually from its primary patron, Iran, along with additional aid from Syria. But the support has diminished, the analysts say, as Iran's economy buckles under international sanctions over its nuclear program, and Syria's government battles rising popular unrest. While Iran pays Hezbollah has been returning favors to its benefactors by sharing the earnings from illegal activities. As the money kept flowing across the countries and from businesses to exchange houses to bank to Hezbollah, authorities soon realized that the numbers did not add up. American officials noted that the car lots in the United States, many owned by Lebanese emigres and one linked to a separate Hezbollah weapons smuggling scheme, were not moving nearly enough merchandise to account for all the cash. An interesting piece of trivia here: more Lebanese live abroad than at home. Following an interagency investigation said to have been conducted between January 2007 and early 2011, the US Justice Department uncovered the nexus. In Washington, after a long debate over when to act and what to make public, the administration decided to invoke a rarely used provision of the Patriot Act. Since the bank had been found to be of primary money laundering concern, the Treasury Department could turn it into an international pariah by forbidding American financial institutions to deal with it. President Obama was briefed, and on February 10th, Treasury officials pulled the trigger. On that day, the US Department of Treasury, Financial Crimes Enforcement Network FinCEN, identified Lebanese Canadian Bank or LCB as a financial institution of primary money laundering concern. As a result, US financial institutions ended their relationship with LCB, precluding it from sending money to the United States. The finding was based on FinCEN's determination that LCB was used for drug traffickers and money launderers around the world, including at least one narco trafficker who provided financial support to Hezbollah. LCB had permitted Hezbollah-related entities to conduct massive cash transactions, in some cases as much as $260,000 per day, without disclosing the source or purpose of the money. Hassan Ayash Exchange was LCB's main source of US currency, and LCB allowed Elisa companies to conduct large cash transactions through the bank without sufficient oversight or disclosure about the sources and purpose of the cash. The Treasury Department also concluded that Iran also used LCB to avoid sanctions, with Hezbollah's envoy to Tehran serving as go-between. As expected, Hezbollah dismissed the American drug trafficking allegation as politically motivated propaganda. In December 2011, US prosecutors filed a lawsuit alleging that LCB and two other firms used at least $329 million in drug trafficking and criminal proceeds from Lebanon to buy used cars in the US and sell them in West Africa. The suit also claimed that Hezbollah used the nexus to launder over $483 million. The civil action sought penalties of over $483 million from LCB and the other firms and individuals alleged to have engaged in money laundering, representing the sum of the funds they laundered. In the same year, the Société Générale de Banque or Lebanon, or SGBL, agreed to buy LCB's assets. As part of an agreement with Treasury officials, Lebanon's central bank set up a process to review the bank's books. However, compliance officers at SGBL's French partner, Société Générale, were skeptical of the central bank's choice of investigators. One of them, the local affiliate of the international auditing firm Deloitte, had presumably missed the drug-related accounts the first time around, when it served as the LCB's outside auditor. Also, according to people knowledgeable about Lebanese banking, the central bank's on-the-ground representative had been recommended to the post by Hezbollah. As an extra step, to reassure very international banks, the chairman of SGBL, Orton Sehenoy, commissioned a parallel audit with the help of Société Générale's chief money laundering compliance officer, and to make sure that his bank did not run afoul of Treasury officials by inadvertently taking on dirty assets, he also hired a consultant intimately familiar with the Patriot Act provision used to take the bank down, John Ashcroft, the former Attorney General whose Justice Department wrote the law. Initially, the auditors looked only at records for the past year. As they began combing through thousands of accounts, they looked for customers with known links to Hezbollah. They also looked for telltale patterns, repeated deposits of vast amounts of cash, huge wire transfers broken into smaller transactions, and transfers between companies in such wildly incongruous lines of business that they made sense only as fronts to camouflage the true origins of the funds. Each type of red flag was assigned a point value. An account with 1 or 2 points on a scale of 10 was likely to survive. One with 8 or 9 cried out for further scrutiny. Ultimately, the auditors were left with nearly 200 accounts that appeared to add up to a giant money laundering operation, with Hezbollah smack in the middle, according to American officials. Complex webs of transactions featured the same companies over and over again, most of them owned by Shiite businessmen, many known Hezbollah supporters. Some have since been identified as Hezbollah fronts. Finally, in August 2012, the US government seized $150 million of the LCB's assets, with the bank later agreeing to $102 million settlement. Let's assume for a minute that LCB was not hand in glove with Hezbollah. Well, then they must be accused of incompetence, for there were enough and more red flags that should have alerted them to how they were being used to transmit tainted money across borders. Firstly, the car business was operating from a high-risk jurisdiction, Benin in West Africa. Cross-border trade is always a risky affair, and when it involves a high-risk jurisdiction, banks must be extra vigilant. The business involved vast amounts of cash. Any cash-intensive business, especially if it's of the Nexus's size, requires banks to carry out enhanced levels of due diligence. Part of the proceeds of business were flowing to Lebanon, another high-risk country which didn't have any connection to the business, which was operating between US and Benin. This should have served as an alarm for the bank authorities that all was not what it seemed. Now let's assume that the car dealerships in US weren't aware that they were contributing to Hezbollah's coffers. Even they had enough opportunities to sense what was going on. A basic due diligence on their trading partners would have revealed their connections to Hezbollah. The banks whom these car dealerships were dealing with should also have been extra vigilant about their customers, because they were dealing in high-value goods and were cash-intensive businesses. As a result, they should have identified who their customers' were and which jurisdictions they were based in. Both the dealerships and the bank should also have questioned why the West Africa-based trading partner had their primary banking relationship with a bank that was headquartered in a third country with high risk rating. Clearly, all these telltale signs were missed. That's all for the time being. I'll come back to you shortly with the next video. If you found the video useful, please like and share it. Do subscribe to my channel and press the bell icon to be notified when I post the next video. Thanks a lot for watching. Here's a list of sources that I have referred for this video. Thank you.